And we're live.
Nice.
Welcome back, you guys, for another episode of the One Day Podcast. We are back for episode 10, and it is your hosts, Lizelle
And Alan.
And today we are going to be kind of just discussing the age-old question of who wears the pants in the relationship. And I guess kind of also diving into gender roles within a relationship. So, to get straight into things, I guess we should kind of reel it back and start from the very beginning for how this could kind of be like conditioned within any individual, I guess. Because I feel like, we're in 2021, times have changed even in the last 20 years or so to what was like society's standard previously.
For sure.
So what's like your first memory of that whole idea of like who wears the pants and I guess gender roles?
I'd say, growing up, I didn't really have both parents, but obviously you could always relate to like movies. So like in movies, you see like the man working and then the women at home, like in the 50s and all that, like black and white, like I Love Lucy. They're always like homemakers for women, and men go to the office and work, or they're either, a blue collar worker or, white collar. And that's the stigma, right? Like men go to work, women stay home, eat, like clean, cook, and take care of
the babies. Yeah.
Right. So that's like my take into like growing up, knowing what that is because of movies and shows.
Yeah, I think like the first thing that comes to mind for me in terms of like media and like because obviously back in the day we didn't have social media,
right?
So we had like movies, TV shows, sitcoms and stuff. And I just remember like Fresh Prince and how like Uncle Phil was like the big breadwinner. He would go out and get the bag, and Aunt Viv would stay home, and like they had a butler, but she would still stay home and like do whatever she would do at home. Right. So for me personally, growing up, I think it was like within shows and stuff, but it was also what I saw within my own household because it was kind of like that. Like, my mom was a stay-at-home mom and my dad would work. So it wasn't like my parents kind of conditioned me, because I know there are people out there who were brought up, whether it be by their parents or if their grandparents were in the picture as well, and were kind of like conditioning them a certain way subconsciously. But it wasn't as though my parents sat me down and were like, right, when you grow up, you have to be a wife, you got to do this, you got to learn how to do this. But I think within the culture and like my mom's Asian heritage, it was kind of ingrained within me, like, you got to learn how to cook, you got to learn how to clean, you got to learn how to like do what they deemed as those like female jobs. So it wasn't as if I was told that like this is, because you're a female, this is what you got to do, and you got to like follow whatever man or whoever you end up with.
Right.
But it's just kind of what I saw. So it was like assumed like, oh, okay, so I guess, like as a female, like I need to learn how to cook, I need to learn how to clean, like, and so I think that would be my earliest memory. But growing up in today's society, of course, I've been able to form my own opinions and perceptions of like what I deem to be the way that I want to be, if that makes sense. So I think that's like I said, my first earliest memory. But because of it's so crazy, because like you said, in the 50s with all those black and white TV shows, it was very conditioned to be like, this is the way it is.
For sure.
The man goes out, gets the bag, the woman stays home, looks after the kids. But because we've progressed in society to have more that of like equality, it's definitely changed the way that people assume their roles within any relationship. So I think for me growing up, I've never been the type of female individual person, whatever you want to label me as. I've never been the type of person to expect anything from anybody. Like I've never really been like, well, I'm in a relationship with a man, so I expect him to feed me, pay for me. That's just not how I've been. And I think that's just kind of like if you're independent, that's what
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of hard because I don't want to be like, well, I'm an independent woman. But for me, it's like I've always felt like, well, no one's going to do anything for me except for me. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Like for
that's
me,
just the way I've always been.
that's exactly why I was so attracted to you when we were just getting to know each other. Because I was like, wow, she paid for getting her car, braces. She has her own place. She has a job, right? Like
Right.
those are the things that attracted me. And on top of like being intellectual, right, and also like could come keep up with a conversation. On top of like have beauty, So it's like, damn,
Oh,
she
thank
checks
you.
out, checks all the boxes. And piggybacking to what I was saying earlier, I
Mm.
like you said, condition, right? I think even since we were young, or you see it everywhere. You see the toys that we grew up with, right? The
Mm.
men, the boys. I grew up with GI Joes and cars, and like
Right.
tool belts and power
Mm-hmm.
tools, and the girls they grew up with Barbies, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
KitchenAid, like all the kitchen stuff, how to clean.
Mm.
I've seen toys that's like vacuum, so I'm guessing that they're. And plus,
Right.
if it's a vacuum, right?
Yeah.
It's pink.
It's
So
pink.
which
Yeah.
boy would
Mm.
actually pick it up and kind of
Yeah.
play with it, right? So
And I think
a
that
lot of
goes
this
back
is
to
conditioning.
like, exactly, that goes back to the whole like pink is for girls, blue is for boys. Because
Right.
like boys can like pink, girls
Right,
can like
right, right.
blue. But I think if we take it back like 20, 30 years ago, it
Hmm.
wasn't like that. Like it was kind of like, oh, girls should like pink, boys should like blue.
Hmm.
So
Right.
yeah, I definitely understand where you're coming from when you talk about toys. I feel like toys definitely have come a long way though. Like you
For
go
sure.
to the toy store now and like Barbie is out here doing like what they would consider to be more of like
Hmm.
masculine jobs. You know how they have those Barbies that
Yeah, they got like a
have the
like a blue
jobs.
collar worker. They
Right.
have all the jobs and all the
Mm.
professions because they want to make
Mm-hmm.
sure they were more inclusive, with all the
Yeah.
careers and stuff like that. But before it was just like, oh, she looks pretty. She
Yeah,
has
yeah.
these pretty clothes. You could buy and exchange clothes, and it's all just pretty stuff, right? And
Yeah.
like pretty car. But now you could
Yeah.
buy a truck, like things like that.
Mm. Yeah. So I think going to like what you were saying earlier
Hmm.
about when we first started dating, and we're like, it's kind of different because for those of you guys who know Alan and I and our story, we are long distance, and we are still long distance. Thank you, pandemic. But
Unfortunately, yeah.
we definitely started off long distance. That's how we really got to know each other for who we are, is
Hmm.
because there was no physical aspect within our relationship. It was all conversation. So getting to know each other and who we are as people was definitely like a different experience. So
Hmm.
when we started dating, or like when we, how do I explain this, babe? Like when we met in person,
Our first
it
time meeting,
was,
yeah.
yeah, our first time meeting in person. It was never like, yeah, I had this expectation like, well, you're the man, like you should
You
be
should, yeah.
paying for me, or like paying to fly me out, or paying
Hmm.
for this and paying for that. For me, it was like I just wanted to meet you and have a good time, like getting to know you. So it was never really, for like personally, I never really had any expectations, and I've never really
Hmm.
been like that where I would go on a date with somebody and have this expectation that they're supposed to pay for me,
Right.
because I've always felt like, if first of all, if I'm in that position where I'm on a date with
Hmm.
somebody, that means I like them enough to give them my time, to
Right.
be spending time with them and going on a date with them, because to me time is the most valuable thing I can give you.
Right.
So if I'm already doing that, then that would mean I have some liking towards you. So
Hmm.
me wanting to pay for things, like pay for a meal, movies, whatever it is that we're out doing, that's never been any issue for me. Like it's not like I have this
Hmm.
expectation of like, well, the man should pay for my meal on the first date, or he should pay for the drinks or whatever. I've
Hmm.
just never had that idea in my mind that I
Hmm.
should expect that. It's like, well, if I like somebody enough, I'm gonna pay for them. I've
Hmm.
just never had that expectation as a female, because I know there is still this idea out in society that like, you know, females should be catered to. And don't get me wrong, I think it is lovely to be catered
Right.
to. We love that feeling, of course. I'm not out here saying like, oh, I don't want to I don't want a man to pay for anything for me because I don't want to owe him anything. It's more just about like, well, if I like you, I want to pay
Right.
like for you. It's not a big deal for me. So that's just how I feel about it personally. But what about you?
Well, for me, growing up, because I've been so independent as well, and not that I've been like in so many dates or anything like that, so I never really got to experience like, oh, I'll pay. But for some reason, I've always paid just because that's
Okay.
how it was.
Yeah.
So like when we went to that trip to Bali the first time we went, um, yeah, I was actually surprised. Like, you paid for your. We were just excited to see each other, right? We were like,
Yeah.
okay, well, what? We looked for tickets. You bought
Yeah.
yours. I bought mine, and we set the date. And then you saw the accommodations, the villa that we stayed at, and you looked it up. It's like, oh, don't worry, I'll just reserve it and pay for it. And I'm like, I at first you didn't really see my reaction because we weren't FaceTiming a lot at that time.
Yeah.
I was really thrown back as I'm like, okay, well, if she has that, for me, I was like, okay, well, let me, when I get there, I'll just take care of the rest of the stuff. I didn't think of anything more, but I just never had anyone take care of those type of things for me because I've been so independent.
I
So when we
understand.
got there, you didn't really notice that I was like, oh, okay, I got the lunch, or I got this,
Yeah.
or we went snorkeling, or we went to go see the turtles. I'll go pay, and I went to go to jump and try to pay without you. Like, actually, I did it so many times, even till like the last night we went to play billiards and we
Yeah.
ate. I was like, oh, I'll put in my card.
Yeah, and
So,
sometimes they'd be like, "Oh, you already paid?" Like, what?
oh, that's right,
Because
right, right.
yeah, it's like there were times where I would pay as well, but if there was ever a chance that you were able to without like
Mm,
letting me get in there and
right.
be like, "Take my card,"
Mm.
you would pay. And so I'd kind of be like,
I
"Oh, like I
remember,
didn't
yeah.
even know that
I
you'd
remember
already
because
paid for it."
for me, I felt kind of bad, like knowing that you paid for the accommodation, and I'm like, all right, this is the least I can do is, she already paid for that. I'll take care of the rest of the trip,
Mm,
or I'll pay for this. And I know you didn't notice that, but I knowing
yeah.
who you are today, I know it didn't matter to you.
Yeah, and it's not like I ever had this expectation of like, well, I paid for the accommodation, so he better be paying for everything
Right,
else. Like,
right.
I just like I liked you enough to want to
Hmm.
fly to go and meet you
Yeah.
and spend some time with you in person. Like I was just excited. I was like, let me pay for this, like so we can get us secured.
Right.
And I just never really thought about it. So I never had any idea of like, well, I hope that he pays for everything while we're there because I paid for the accommodation. It was just like I'm just excited to see
Right.
him.
That
Yeah.
would have been an expensive catfish if that was if I didn't turn out to be who I am,
Seriously,
and you
I
paid
thought about
for
that.
your flight,
Yeah.
getting there, and then the
Mhm.
accommodations, and you find out I'm just like
Mhm.
someone totally different.
Right. But I actually thought about that now that you mentioned that. I thought about like if this man doesn't turn up, like at least I have a really nice villa to stay in and just can have like a relaxing
Yeah.
week and a bit to myself. Like I'm good.
And
So,
plus, your
yeah.
trip was like 5 hours away. My trip was
Yeah.
what 16 to 16
Yeah.
plus hours away.
Hmm.
So yeah, for you would have been chilling in the villa, and then 5 hours later you could just go home.
Exactly.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I get you. But yeah, that would have been horrible.
Yeah, I think I do remember in the beginning of our relationship,
Hmm.
you did voice to me like how you were a little bit taken aback and shocked by
Yeah.
my I don't want to say this like to hype myself up and make myself like, but how do I explain this? It's like you're a little bit
Mm,
surprised and taken aback by my generosity when
I
it
was just
came
gonna
to
say
like
generosity. Yeah. Hmm.
when it came to even like gifts and stuff, or
Right.
if we were together and I would want to pay
Hmm.
for things, you were just like, what the? I
Hmm.
remember you telling me, you're like, I just can't believe that this is how you are.
I remember the first gift you ever gave me, and to me, I was really shocked when I got it because it was a bracelet that she bought, and it's from one of the high end companies. And I looked at it and I'm like, I've never received a gift this expensive before, from anyone.
Right.
And I was just taken back because, again, I'm so used to buying myself stuff. And if someone buys me stuff, it's just like, oh, here's a meal, here's this. And it's really small, you know. And I'm not
Mm.
used to having anyone paying X amount of dollars for me. So when you gave me that, I was like, what the heck? Like, why did
I
she spend
remember.
this
Yeah,
much money
I
on me?
remember.
It's okay. I got, like, for me, I'm so comfortable, like, working for what I have. And I don't really have nothing to complain about because I
Mm.
feel like I have everything I need, right? Things I want, I have, and the things I need, I definitely have, like just essentials. So when you gave me that thing, and I'm like, wow, this is like the most expensive and generous thing someone ever gave me, and I was just taken back in the beginning. So,
Oh. For me, it was just really sentimental, and that's why I
right.
chose to gift
Mm-hmm.
you that. It wasn't something that I was thinking about, like the
Right.
price. It was
Mm-hmm.
more about the sentimental meaning
Mm-hmm.
behind it.
Yeah.
So, for me, yeah, it was just more about giving you
Yeah.
something that would be
When
memorable. So,
when you explained that to me, it made sense, and that's how I took it in. And I'm like, you know what? Okay, that makes perfect sense because it had a character that reminded us of how we met,
mm,
and that's how you bought it, and
yeah,
that's how why you bought it in the beginning. And when
mm-hmm,
you explained to me what the sentimental value of it and why you bought that, and it reminds me of how we started talking. Then I let go of I guess my ego, or just accepted that. I'm like, oh, okay, so it makes sense. I'm not gonna fight. Like I was gonna try to
yeah,
return it, and I'm like,
you had a hard time
mm-hmm,
accepting it, I would say. And for me, it was like, please accept it because I feel like it's going to be a slap in the face if you don't.
right,
And I had to explain like the reason as to
mm-hmm,
why I wanted to gift you that particular
mm,
piece. And yeah, then you were like, okay,
right,
this is like something I'm definitely going to have to get used to because like you
mm-hmm,
had explained to me, it just wasn't something that you were used to. Yeah, like I said, it was just all about like the sentimental meaning behind it. But
right,
aside from like gifts and stuff, because obviously, like, you know, well, for me personally, I'm all about like the sentimental meaning behind things, whether it's
mm-hmm,
expensive or not expensive, doesn't really matter to me.
right,
But if we go into in relationships when it comes to paying for things,
mm-hmm,
we've never been like 50-50 type thing, and
for sure,
everybody's dynamic is different. I have never had this expectation of like, well, I paid for this, so you should pay for that,
mm-hmm,
and vice versa. It's more so like I think of us as a team,
right,
and we got each other
mm-hmm,
type thing, you know. So I feel like I know it might sound strange to some people because we're not like technically married yet, but it's like for me, it's like what's mine is yours. So
mm-hmm,
if I'm doing good, like you're doing good type thing.
right,
So that's how I've always viewed it. It's never been like, well, this is mine and that's
mm-hmm,
yours. And so like if you're like you better be grateful if I'm helping you out with things. Like I hate that
oh,
mentality, you
yeah,
know,
that's a
of
pet
like
peeve for sure,
yes, for me too. I have to say it. Like, not many things like frustrate me in that sense, but that I don't like that when
mm-hmm,
I witness that. When people are made to feel like they owe something to
right.
somebody,
And then
you
you
know.
have those expectations of like, oh, since I did this, you better do
Mm.
this for me. So yeah, I
Yeah.
never really had that. And like you said, it's a team effort, I guess. To describe it, because again, we never really, when it's like your turn, or I didn't really flinch on like now I don't like, oh, okay, she got it or I got it. It doesn't really matter anymore.
So yeah, it's not like we go 50-50 on things like
Right.
split it down the middle exactly. And even in the very beginning of our relationship, clearly we weren't like that at all.
Mm-hmm.
Either one of us wasn't like that. But one thing that I do remember you saying in the very beginning, because if we're going to talk about like who wears the pants in the relationship, like
Mm-hmm.
let's go back to that for a second. You've always said like I know when to let you lead,
Right.
and that makes total sense to me because yeah, I've never really felt like oh that's a task that a man should do, so I'm gonna just leave it for the
Mm.
man, or oh he doesn't know how to cook, forget it, just let me do it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
for me personally, I've always felt like, well, if you don't know how to do something, let me help you and show you and teach you. It's
Mm-hmm.
never really been like, oh, well, that's something you got to do, and this is something I got to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know we've spoken about this previously, is that in a podcast, is that you never really used to cook.
Yeah.
And I never viewed that as like, of course he doesn't because he's a man, which I know a lot of people would assume that. For
Mm-hmm.
me, it was like, okay, well, maybe you just didn't really have anybody to take the time to show you or teach
Mm-hmm.
you. So even though that we are long distance, that's something that we like to do together, is that we like to cook together.
Right.
And I will show you like how to do things, or even like a way to make things easier for yourself so it's more efficient. And in that sense, like, yeah, those things that I don't know how to do that you explain to me how to do, and vice versa. And it's all about
Mm-hmm.
like knowing when to let your partner lead,
Right.
and when their strengths are like, not to say better than yours, but they're able to bring you up with them. Does that
For
make
sure.
sense?
And,
Yeah.
and for me, again, maybe because for me, I'm not ashamed to ask any questions or how to. Like, if I don't know how to do things, I'm going to ask you, because if I don't know, how else am I going to know? Right.
Mm.
So I never really had that ego. It's like, oh, I got it. I'll figure it out, or I'll do it. It's more like, well, I don't know how to do this. So how can you do it? Or again, it's trial and error. So example is cooking, right? I knew once I do it, I'll know how to do it. But just
Yeah.
starting and getting to know like what to put and when to put things, when you helped me out, after that, again, it kind of put a battery on my back, and you could pretty much give me an ingredients, and I can pretty much cook whatever it is, and it
Yeah.
helped me out a lot. It helped I would say you empower me instead of just like, take over. Like you empowered me to
Yes.
say, hey, you know what? If you can do this,
Mm.
like it really pushed me to do more at the
Mm.
time, especially last year in the pandemic.
Mm.
So that's
Yeah,
something I really
definitely.
appreciate.
Yeah, and I think like what you said, empower, I think that's
Mm-hmm.
what's really important in relationships, is it's more so about like empowering your partner and
Mm-hmm.
encouraging them and motivating them to know that like, okay, babe, like you don't know how to change a tire? Come here, let me show you.
Right.
Because for me, I think of it as like, okay, say for example, if I assumed all the like female
Mm-hmm.
roles in the household, God forbid if something were to happen to me and I got really sick and I couldn't cook for you, what are
Right.
you going to do? Okay, you can go get takeout and all that. But it's like when a woman is like stay at home, I think naturally men don't know exactly how much goes into that, and like how much that she may do while she's at home. So like cooking, cleaning, taking care of the kids and stuff.
Right.
If something happens to her and your partner doesn't even know like the first thing of how to handle the situation, how are they going to fend for themselves, type thing.
Right.
So I think it's also about like helping them help you,
Mm-hmm.
because if they're not able to do certain things, then you can assume that role, and vice versa. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So it's not just about how do I put this? It's not just about assuming certain roles and doing things. It's about helping each other grow
Mm-hmm.
and become well-rounded so they can do everything. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's
Absolutely.
the way that I view it, is that, yeah, talking about, when to let me lead and
Lead.
vice
Yeah.
versa. But it's also about helping the other person grow and
Mm-hmm.
learn how to do things as well.
For
Like, I
sure.
never would be like, oh, you don't know how to cook. Okay, forget it. You're never going to know. Like, just let
Right.
me do it. It's like, okay, well, we can do it together. Let's
Mm-hmm.
learn. Let me teach you. And
And
vice
it
versa.
was pretty fun. I mean, again, it's something that I didn't do for a long time,
Mm,
and I knew how to do simple things like breakfast food and
of course, yeah.
spaghetti,
And
the
that's
little
great.
simple things. But
Yeah.
going into like cooking a steak and cooking like more intricate stuff, like a
Yeah.
entree, like
Hmm.
you definitely helped me out and empowered me to do more. So like
Yeah.
what date nights now is fun because like we can go into like making shrimp tacos or like things that I know like okay I have the confidence in doing, and you literally empowered me to do all those things now. So now it's fun for us.
Yeah, and because, like, we don't live together, it was never really something that we naturally fell into or had to transition
Mm,
into. Because,
right.
when you live with someone and it kind of just, you don't even have to discuss it. It's like, oh, this person will do this person does that.
Mm-hmm.
But because we're long distance and all we do is talk this has been brought up in conversations where
Mm-hmm.
we have discussed, like, okay, when we live together, like, how are we going to run our household? Like,
Right.
what do you see for this? What is your opinion on this? What are your views on this? And I think we have a really great understanding of the way that we view each other and how we
Mm-hmm.
treat each other, and also in terms of like how we want to raise our children in the future to
Right.
not be conditioned to those assumed gender roles.
Right.
And because even though, like, as I said, 30 years ago, it was a lot more different to what it is today. There is a lot more equality in today's society,
For sure.
but best believe there still are like kids shows and cartoons and movies out there that still do have that notion behind them, that like, oh, females do this and males do this. and
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to raise our children in that way, to believe that they have to live up to this expectation, or believe that they got to stay down here because a man's going
Right.
to cater to them, or vice versa. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's all about building each other up and helping each other grow, and just being the best that you can be as an individual.
Yeah.
And
And for your partner.
for sure, yeah.
Right.
And it's like, if I can take care of my garden and also help you water yours too,
Mm.
then we can both live in a beautiful garden,
Right.
So that's the
Absolutely.
way that I view it. And yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, a lot of these things I know we spoke a lot about when we're gonna, when once we live together. And I get excited because, like, again, for me growing up, like, it was kind of separated. Like, me and my brother, we took care of the trash, mowed the lawn, plowed the snow, all the like heavy lifting we did. And my mom did like the laundry. I even
Right.
did the dishes, and we cleaned like certain parts of the house. But yeah, I know for us, we spoke about it, and you're like, oh, I'll help you clean the car, or I'll help you. There's no, you're gonna wash the dishes and you're gonna cook. Like, I think for me, I can't wait till we get together and we do things together. Because first of
Yeah.
all, if we do it, it's less work for both of us. Like, we do it
Yeah.
together, right? And
Yeah.
it's fun for me.
Yeah. I feel like we've only had like a small taste of that
Hmm.
in the times that we have been together. But for me, it's just all about teamwork.
Yeah.
Like the old saying goes, teamwork makes the dream work.
Right.
And I feel like if we're both able to help each other, it makes the workload easier.
For sure.
And it's also teaching each other things in the process. So
Hmm.
you can't go wrong with that. So
Right.
yeah, for me personally, I've never really felt like Alan's a man, like he has to cater to me and pay for this and do that.
Right.
No, it's just, if I'm up, you're up. Like if
Right.
I'm doing good, you're coming up with me, and vice versa. That's how I've always felt, because it's like, you're not just a person who's on my team and I'm the leader. It's like we're on the same team,
Hmm.
on the same level together. That's how
Right.
I feel about us in this relationship.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, like in terms of pants, okay, let's go to the root of the question. Who wears the pants in our relationship, babe?
I think we both do. We both do. And
Yeah.
like I was telling you before, it's like, it's not about who wears the pants. It's how can I help you wear your pants? How can
Yeah.
I empower you or make sure that fits you right, that looks good on you, and
Yes.
vice versa.
Yes, yeah. I love that, yeah. So that's how we view it, is like, it's not about like who wears the pants. It's
Hmm.
about like, okay, we take turns and we help each other
Hmm.
put them on. So,
Right.
that's all it is at the end of the day.
Yep, pretty much. I mean, again, that, like, you gotta throw away that old mentality or that stigma of like, okay, got the man brings the bacon and the woman cooks it, So that's how
And
we do it.
yeah, for sure. And I mean, like, there's nothing wrong with having that idea of like the man does this and the female does this.
Hmm.
Like I said, there's so many different dynamics in multiple relationships. Like everyone has their own views and beliefs and perceptions, and what, like, this is just for us. So I'm not saying like what we do is right, what you do is wrong.
Hmm.
It's just from what we've witnessed growing up in today's society, it's like, it's very different to what it was like 20, 30 years ago
Absolutely.
as to what it is today. There is a lot more equality. But if you still do have those beliefs, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
I definitely want to say that. It's like, you do you, you do what makes you happy, as long as your beliefs and what you're doing isn't condoning violence or hurting anybody.
Right.
I don't care what anybody else wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's my view. This is just the way that we are.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, it really works, I
Yeah.
feel. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say also just as a suggestion or what I've noticed and through our experience, yeah, surprise your partner. Like surprise them on something that you think they're not you think that you're not gonna do for them, right? So like for me, there's tons of examples that you've done that for me, and I'm like, oh, okay. I like making them feel good, and you doing things for them that they didn't expect is a really good feeling. And we had tons of that stuff that we went through, with our relationship.
Yeah, for sure. I know I definitely get like excited when I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't expect you
Yeah.
to do this for me. Like, thank you. So, yeah, for us in our relationship, I believe it's all about helping each other grow and evolve and become better versions of themselves.
Right.
And the both of us like going up together, even if
Right.
it's within something as simple as like everyday things like cleaning, cooking, like, you know what I mean? So that's the way that I've always viewed it, and I'm so glad that we align in that sense. I know, like you mentioned in the beginning, it was kind of hard for you to accept that. You were like, what kind of female is this? Like, I never have seen someone who's like so willing to do things for me. I think
For
that's what you said
sure.
to me before, is like, you were very, I guess, like taken aback and like shocked and kind of like, what? Like,
Right. Mm-hmm.
but I'm glad that we align in that sense where you're willing to accept that, and it's not like you let your ego get to you and it's made you feel emasculated or like you're
Right.
not man enough to accept that
Now,
as well.
now I sit back and I'm like, wow, she's really good at this. And I sit back and I'm like, I'm actually learning so that when it's my time, like I know how to do it. So,
Yeah, and I feel like it's also about the delivery and the way that you voice that, because it's one thing to want to help your partner become better and like learn something for themselves, but it's another thing to help them but also condemn them for it at the same time. Like if I were to be
right.
like, oh, if you were to be like, oh my god, you don't know how to do
Exactly.
this,
Right.
like what,
Like, you
like,
don't know how to change a tire, or
right,
you don't know how to cook this,
right, yeah.
You're making them feel
So
bad.
exactly, yeah. So I think it is definitely about the delivery as well. That's something to think about. But yeah, that's something that we just wanted to sit down and chat with you guys about today. And like we said, for us, it's that we both wear the pants and we both help each other put them on and know when to take them off too.
Take them off. Right. Right.
So yeah, do you have anything else to say, my love?
Nope, that's it. Just encourage each other, help each other, especially now that at this time we're still in the pandemic. So just take care of each other.
Definitely, for sure. So with that being said, thank you guys for tuning in to today's episode of the One Day Podcast. If you are listening to us on any of our streaming services, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any more episodes. And if you are watching us on YouTube, thank you for spending part of your day with us. And that's about it. So we will catch you guys on the next episode of the One Day Podcast.
Deuces.
Bye.
Bye.